Here we are, example 3, estimating mean. All right, a healthcare professional wants to estimate the birth weights of infants. That would be expressed as a mean, wouldn't it? This is different than the previous assignment where we were estimating proportion, otherwise known as percentages. We're estimating a mean. So that does indeed put us into this discussion. We're estimating a mean. But now, okay, here's the deal. We've done 2 examples where we talked about confidence intervals, but we're about to see this would be a different sort of question where we're talking about determining a sample size. And how do we know that? Right here. How large of a sample? Blah, blah, blah. How large of a sample? So combining those 2 things, we're estimating a mean and we want to know a sample size. So this would be the slide that Mr. Sandpaper made for you that says sample size. How large of a sample? All right. Now what I did here, and I apologize if this is confusing to you, but on this assignment, it says what parameter is being estimated. Well, birth weights would be expressed as a mean, as an average, wouldn't it? So we're estimating a mean, the average birth weight of an infant, and basically the formula for that is right there on the screen and on your printout. So there we are. That's all we need to do on this one. N equals, and so forth. Z alpha over 2 sigma. We'll get into the details, but again, in my experience, identifying the proper formula is the key. So, how large of a sample? And you're estimating a mean. Okay? Now on this assignment, that half of the flow chart is what you're going to do. The other half would be the previous assignment. What I decided to do was to put all of the sample size formulas on one slide. And I will just simply tell you on assignment 21, 22, if you're doing a sample size, that's it. Okay? Fair enough. So quit listening for a few minutes if you want. But what I did is I went ahead and said, do you remember on assignment 20 when we estimated percentages? That's where we had to determine whether or not they gave us a p-hat. And then we had those 2 formulas there. So these would be the sample size formulas for assignment 20. And this would be the sample size formula for assignment 21, 22. Okay, so if you're doing 21, 22, there it is. Okay, so now it's just a matter of plugging the relevant numbers in here and remembering and identifying what these different things are. So here's how it would work. Let's start plugging numbers in here. Okay, I always save the z-score for last, so let's talk about sigma. I hope you remember that the symbol sigma is the symbol for the standard deviation. And right here it says the standard deviation is 8 ounces. So that would go in right there, 8. And then I hope you remember from previous discussions, assignment 20, do these in order. Assignment 20, we talked about E is margin of error within, plus or minus. And it talks about they want to be within 2 ounces. There's your key word, within. That's your margin of error, 2 ounces. By the way, on the previous assignment, your margin of error was a percentage, and we changed that to decimal, but this is not a percentage. So the margin of error within 2 ounces is 2. 2. You're not going to change it to a percentage. It's not a percentage. The Z would be related to the level of confidence they desire, which is 90%. Now I had the foresight to leave that up over there from example number 1. Let's lead you through that again. 90%, this is the same as example 1. We put half of the 90% on both sides of the bell curve. We cut it in half. 45%, which was halfway between these 2 on the table. We averaged them. That was 1.645. So that's the very same discussion that we had on example number 1. And yes, I did that on purpose so that I could be lazy. But I want to remind you that level of confidence could change. It will on subsequent examples. Don't always assume it's 1.645, but it is on this one. And then there you go, all right? And then you crunch those numbers, and you know, again, I keep telling you, do these assignments and watch these examples in sequence, because you'll hopefully remember see math here, the calculator would lead to 43.2964. But I hope you remember that when you're talking about sample sizes, you're talking about how many do we survey? How many do we sample? And you can't have a decimal number for a sample size. So I hope you would remember that this would be the case where we round it up, right? Round it up. And so that would round upward to 44, and they should survey 44. And then remember that we talked about what is your sample? What is your population, right? Well, they want to estimate the birth weights of infants. They don't care how much I weigh, even though I act like an infant. I'm not an infant. And that should be the label we should put with that, would be 44 infants. All right? So there you go. And as I mentioned earlier, you have the answer slides. The slide that says 44 infants following that example. That would be the answer to that. Okay, so just remember on a sample size, you always round up. Let's do our best to put the label with it, please, because it really does matter. All right, so yeehaw, that's that one.